Caleb. So thank you for coming, Caleb. It's what, 1 a.m. there at the moment? New Orleans?
Well, it's midnight. So for a horror guy, this is perfect. I am in my perfect element at midnight.
Thank you for coming. It's 3 p.m. here on a Monday afternoon. So there was nothing better or nothing more than I wanted to do than sit down with Caleb. And we had a couple of weeks ago a fantastic idea to go back and forth and criticize one another's work. So we have been friends not too long now. It's probably only been about 3 months when I first hopped on Yours and Disinterest podcast, as well as David. And you and I really connected and it was awesome and we became friends immediately. So
Absolutely.
We had this idea, and what we often see in the industry is that authors don't take criticism well. And we want to always make sure that there's a clear line between constructive criticism and when somebody's just being really rude or negative and in no way is going to help you write. So Caleb and I were discussing this and we had the great idea to just risk our friendship. No, I'm kidding. It's not that bad. But to dive in and read one another's work. And it was very interesting because both the genres we write are not usually the genre that we would read ourselves. So we thought we'd take to it and see what we found in it and how to best receive criticism and also how to offer it in a friendly manner, but one that might make their work a lot better. So we're not holding back on this one. I'm super excited about it. What are your thoughts on it, Caleb?
Oh, I can't wait to get into this. Be mean to me. That's fine. In fact, like the shirt says, scare me.
I'll let you go first, actually. So you read my recent release, the Shadow Minds Journal, that came out in 2018. Go, hit me hard.
Oh, Lordy. Okay, so to begin with, I loved the book. It is absolutely not my genre that I would normally reach for. I have very little experience in reading paranormal, which I assume paranormal erotica would be kind of, or paranormal romance would essentially be the best description for it. Yeah, really so far off. The biggest thing I learned a lot from it, is even though you would think that paranormal and horror would be somewhat, they are not similar. I learned that. I really learned that as I went through this. I was like, there's no real horror elements in something, even though it's got demons and monsters and all kind of crazy shit going on. There was not really those horror elements. So paranormal and horror, they sound like they would mix. They really don't. Let me tell you, the getting into it took a little bit of time just because it's not my genre as a reader. I kind of had to get in that headspace to sort of navigate into the story. But once I got in there, I was in. And you took me along for the ride. You were a wonderful tour guide throughout. It kept me coming back to it. The first 30 or 40 pages were the part that kind of felt almost like that kind of, I don't want to say it felt like a chore because that's not the right word, but it felt like a task. Like, I'm doing this for the purpose of this video. Let me read it. And then I found myself wanting to get back to it. I would read 30 pages at a time or so, set it down, and I would find myself wanting to get back to the book. Not from a task perspective, but from a reader perspective, because I was invested all of a sudden into the characters and the environment, into what was going on with it. And I maintained that, or I should say you maintained that level of investment in me all the way to the last page. So it was an enjoyable read. I absolutely loved it. I will be reading the rest of the series as you pulse it out to us. You've definitely got a reader in me. So yeah, that's my opening statement on it.
Not crying. No, I'm kidding. And that's really interesting too, because one of my biggest questions, and you and I had discussed this previously, was I'm a scaredy cat. Anyone who knows me or watches any videos or any of my social media knows I get scared quickly. And so I found it really interesting that in the recent years of my career, I've been going into darker writing, into scarier scenes, so to speak. And I remember asking you whether I was delving into horror. And I remember the best way that you explained to me what horror was it's more the suspense. It's not that you're going to arrive there or there's going to be someone there to scare you, but it's the creeping sensation that something is following you. And is that the way you best described it?
Well, the way I usually put it is, horror is not being chased by a bear. Horror is being out in the woods and realizing there's bears all over the place. So yeah, it's that element of danger that is imminent but has yet to arrive. And that's the way I typically kind of classify, horror genre.
And I found, first of all, I appreciate your feedback and I love that. So I'm going to do my opening statement, I suppose, on yours. It was very the same for me, to be honest. Initially, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. So I was quite scared because I knew it was horror, and this is by far not a genre I would usually gravitate towards. And the opening scene is pretty straight off the bat, so to speak. You have a lot of like sacrilege, occult, blood, gore, not even demons, but they are demons at the same time. So I think what had scared me the most initially was the reality of the situation, because there are situations from this. So it kind of, I guess what scared me the most was being able to separate with paranormal. I don't really believe in vampires, so to speak. So I was like, that's easier for me to write. But when it became to rituals and stuff like that, it felt realistic to me. And that's what scared me. And it was weird because as soon as I got over the barrier of, I'm freaking out here. Well, not freaking out, but it was scaring me. I found that I actually really started to enjoy it. And I was surprised by the way that you've laid it out. Is every story or every chapter revolves around certain characters. And so each story you're getting a glimmer into liking that character or hearing their story. So I thought it was just a bunch of different stories sort of following the same line. I didn't realize until about halfway how they all interconnected. And I thought that was very clever, because I was getting a grasp for all these different relationships that were happening. And then when they tied in halfway through, it was really amazing. I both read this and listened to this. So I was finding myself going out for walks in the morning. I was like cooking when I was listening to it, chopping up my carrots as I'm talking to, like Tobit chasing after people. And again, it was interesting. Like, I won't say too much now, but there were so many elements of it that I was surprised about, which was really nice, because I find it's very rare to find books that have a lot of twists in it that keep me intrigued. And it was very much the same thing after I got past the initial hesitation of, this isn't my usual genre, I don't know what I'm getting myself into. I became really invested in it. And all I could think about was how clever your writing was, because you are a fantastic storyteller. And it was really in the cut, like I knew you would be talented, but it sounds horrible. Not that it still surprised me, but I was surprised how invested I was, considering how much hesitation I initially had for the genre itself. I genuinely really, really enjoyed it. And like I said, I just wanted to keep reading it. And really, because when it came near the end of it, I had no idea how you were going to conclude it. And again, you evoked more questions at the end, but you concluded it perfectly. And I'm hoping and assuming there's going to be more in the series, or a separate series coming off it. Don't pull that face, Caleb. Yeah, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So thank you for sharing your world with me. It was mind-blowing.
My pleasure. And thank you. That means so much to me, especially coming from somebody of your caliber. And that was kind of one of the intimidating things for me going into this, was realizing how much more you have written than I have. Looking at your library of books and everything you got out there, your accolades, your international award-winning status there, which I hope to have one day. So to get that kind of feedback from someone on your level, like I said, you're my final beta reader.
I want to comment on the way that you have it out on media at the moment. So I would like to say nothing's unconventional these days in regards to writing and printing, but I was surprised that you had it on ebook. And the format that you have it in is each story, and you have a link on Creepypasta, I believe it is, which you won already awards on, which is awesome. Oh, sorry, you're nominated. You won an award though, didn't you?
Well, I've won different awards for different stories. For the Tobits, a lot of them got nominated for stuff, but none of them ever won.
That's BS. No, I'm kidding. But
that's okay. We're about to come down. Like literally, I was waiting for you to do your thing. I've already copied and pasted all the manuscripts back over to start the final editing process. So you may be the last person to lay eyes on them for free.
Woohoo! Well, and the one thing I really did want to compliment as well is the voice actress, should I say, who has done the audio versions of it, is an amazing storyteller as well. I think with your words and her voice and her characters, it was perfect. Like I became very accustomed to having her in my ear. So it was amazing.
Creeperoni, that's what she calls herself on YouTube, is absolutely, I call her the voice of my work. You know, she's narrated a lot of my stuff, not just all the Tobits, but she did quite a few other things of mine. And I trust her to read anything of mine.
I guess then my next question would be, getting into a little bit more nittier grittier, is discussing the world building, because obviously you and I have designed completely different universes to reality. And also, well, actually, no, yours is probably, I guess that's what makes yours a little bit more clever and scary, is because yours does have modern elements into it, and you've definitely incorporated it into the real world. So that is terrifying. But also your thoughts on, the flow of the storyline, characters, what elements did you think were maybe unrealistic reactions in certain situations? What were your finer points, and what would you maybe slightly have tweaked if you had written it yourself?
Okay. So I think that when it comes to the way we world build, for example, I would say that I am more Marvel and you are more DC, in the sense that, Marvel sets their stuff in the real world, New York, Los Angeles, or those cities are where the things happen. The X-Men lived in New York, Spider-Man lived in New York, whereas DC creates Gotham and Metropolis. They make up cities to exist as kind of a parallel or reflection, I guess, of contemporary life. So I contemporary realism is one of my strong aspects in my writing. So yeah, Delphia, even though it is a fictional city, it still existed in the real world. So the city of Delphia was competing against the real world, as it were. So the people's reactions to it were, very much how you or I would feel if we found out there was some kind of secret occult city in Antarctica. It blew people's minds. So in your style, I noticed you made a city. You kind of created a city. So for me, it's always a little bit more of a challenge to kind of visualize that. Because I can't just, Shabia, is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah.
Okay. I got that right on the first try.
Yay.
So I have no idea what Shabia looks like besides what you give me in the book. Whereas if somebody sets a story in New Orleans, like 99% of my stuff is, like, you can kind of envision it. You can look those things up on Google and actually see the buildings and things like that. So that was one thing that in my writing that, talk about, what would I have done differently, is I would have set it in probably, if you want that kind of Gothic, I would have probably set it in Detroit or, some older city like that, and then explained that they built it back up, and things like that. But still the reader can kind of be accessible to that. But once again, that's just my personal thing. I know a lot of fantasy style writing, of course, takes place in, made up cities and made up places. But, if I were writing it, yeah, I prefer to put stuff in realistic settings that the reader can kind of get immersed in without having to rely on me to describe the place. I can describe New York without having to describe the architecture and the streets and the people of New York. People can already kind of get an idea what New York looks like. So that, that's always something that's kind of a challenge to accessibility, because I still don't know completely what it looks like. I don't know what your mind saw for Shabia when you were creating it. You and I are now seeing completely different cities in our minds. Just like if I lent this book to somebody and they read it, they're going to see something completely different. And that can be a very good thing sometimes, though, as well.
That's good feedback. And again, I guess it is like the difference of our style in writing. I liked yours in many ways, because as we know that obviously I create different cities, obviously, Shabia, for example, which is why I found yours so interesting, because even as we spoke about it, even though Delphia was a fictional place, you had so much fact around it. And this is one of the things that scares me a little bit, especially with new writers, is that they create places but they don't enforce enough reality to make it realistic for the reader. And so if you do not have elements that the reader can grasp onto to make it fabricated and real, then they're not going to believe in your words and they're not going to want to pursue the story. So what I loved about Delphia was It was in the Antarctic, but you mentioned things about the stations that were close by and things that would be and are in the human world. So you basically planted it right smack bang in the middle of reality. And so it was very easy for me to grasp, and which again, it added that element of fear a little bit, because you're thinking, shit, what if this place is real? And that's what I found myself the most, was when I was reading more and more into the story, I was almost scared to say Hyraktobit or come across things, because I was like, it was so embedded and real throughout the different generations of stories that you had. You had stories from the 1900s and modern day, and you were very thorough in explaining what their environment was and where they were in life. And so when it came to the pace especially, I really enjoyed that, because every story had its own pace, but at the same time, it kind of was structured around the same amount of word count as well for each, until obviously you got further into the book and then there was more elements to incorporate. And then you also had your characters interlacing as well. So their stories were coming in, and it was cool because you already knew the background story of that character, because it was already a sub-story. So instead of trying to quickly bring in like the background, he had lost his wife this way and this is what happened, or he got tricked that way. And I really enjoyed in yours too, it really raised a lot of the notions of how we can be tricked so easily, when especially one of my favorite characters, Mr. Pinkerton. And you know what, that's the thing I have to pick with you actually, is that I was thoroughly enjoying your characters who were so corrupt and evil, and yet I was like, hey, I actually like this character, but they weren't good people or good demons or whatever they might have been. They weren't good, and they were very scary. But for those who were making deals with Mr. Pinkerton throughout it, I guess it was very thought-provoking in regards to how humanity currently is, and working on a psychological level as well as preying on the weak, how to feed somebody's ego, how to make them feel more powerful than what they are, to then sweep it out underneath them, and the games that people will play, or what they are willing to do to obtain, whether it's revenge or whether it's, and that's the thing, you did bring a lot of different stories and elements in, bringing a lover back, or being able to get vengeance on your lover that was taken away. And then even like the one that got, sorry, I'm rambling, but I'm like, the one that I found really interesting as well was Claire Noble's. I absolutely loved. And so I really enjoyed hers because it was the element of science as well. And this is, again, not something I would usually read, but you have so much, you can tell you've done your research, or you've learned so much in your own life that you could actually talk about this in an informative manner. At no point did I read any of your book and think, is that realistic? Like, could they really talk about that? Or is it really called this? I never questioned that, not once. So I feel like almost I was educated in your book in a broader way, which was amazing. I did enjoy the brothers, although I want to say I didn't like the ending, but I did. Okay, I'm just gonna start telling names and what happens. We're gonna rip it off.
Of course,
so
absolutely.
I loved all three of the sisters, the three sisters of Tobit, who were basically, so for everyone who's watching, Hyraktobit is the god, the evil god that his followers are basically trying to appease him and live in this dynasty of a world. But, in it, they have to listen to his word, they have to listen to his command, and there's a lot of, what's the word I'm after, when they're eating each other, cannibalism. There's, there it is, cannibalism.
There's lots of that.
But it's really interesting because there are three sisters who maintain this, so to speak. So they go out into the real world, and if there's any problems, then they will go out and they will enforce our power. So if they have problems, such as Claire Noble, who was a scientist who got information basically about Delphia and reported it to the world, they wanted to squash her. There was also the element of two brothers who had known for a long time about Tobit's existence, and kind of in a way they were stuck with it because they had heritages, so they were considered as cursed, but they wanted to get rid of Tobit. They wanted to make sure that the world did not know who or what he was, because then it would empower him more. So their sole purpose was to make sure that his existence was not voiced. And when Claire Noble's did, it turned into a problem and it connected them. And then your other big player, there's heaps of big players in this, but these are my three main big players I want to say, is, what's his name? The first chapter.
Oh, Derek.
Derek, sorry, I'm really bad with names. But Derek was a massive, he actually went into Delphia and he was the only one that escaped. So these are your big three problem childs, so to speak, for the three sisters and well, the sisters of Tobit, should I say. And what I found most interesting was all the background stories to them. Tammy, is it Tammy?
Which there's Tabitha, Lacey, and Lena.
Tabitha, that's all we're after. Tabitha was probably the one that surprised me the most out of the backstory because you had in there pure torture. And it was interesting to listen to her story. I was actually quite surprised about how it came about in the sense that when, is it Soka?
Mm-hmm.
Soka. So Soka's a little girl. I feel like I'm just blah, blah, blah. But Soka is a little girl in there who has mental abilities and is able, she's stuck in Delphia and she can connect with the outside world. So that element actually surprised me a little bit in the book. And if I'm being honest, at first I didn't know how I felt about it because I think in the sense, because you'd already created this world and it was sort of going by the same rules the whole time, it had, you know, there was obviously people in goat masks chasing and there was still that fear factor and there was still a little bit of magic and powers when it came to Mr. Pinky in those situations. But because nothing, I guess, we'd never seen the mental aspect of it behind anyone having any powers. So when Soka came into it and we had that chapter purely on her ability to go into a, let's say, mainstream, so to speak, or a different world in mental, I want to say. I don't know how to explain it, but it surprised me a little bit. And but the elements had to come in because obviously that's how you know it ends. So it did, not in a bad way, it just surprised me because I thought I had a grasp on what the world already was, and then you opened it up again. And that's what I'm talking about when it comes to the twists and the turns. So I was like, oh, okay, shit, here's another layer. And so I found that interesting that was in fact the way that you found out about Tabitha's background. And hers was probably to me the most unsettling, which is surprising because I thoroughly, and I hated myself for it, really enjoyed Lacey's. I loved her chapter because she is a true psychopath. And it just ticked all the boxes for me as to how I thought an outline of a sociopath would be. And even though reading that chapter is very, very gruesome and very intense, I loved it because it was so realistic. And also I was intrigued by that mindset because, you know, these are things like people watch Criminal Minds and people watch this because they want to see how other people tick. And it just goes to show how well you had executed her character into fitting that profile with her own quirk. And I also loved who was the third one? Sorry. What was her name?
Which one? The other sister?
Yeah.
Lena.
I loved hers as well. Sorry, I'm always so bad with names. But I loved hers as well because she was in no way a duller character. She was a more reserved character, which was very different to the other two. And obviously in the elements that happened with her betraying the others, it kind of had to happen, but I did like hers because she was still connected with humanity. I felt invested with your characters, and I was surprised by how much I felt invested into each of them. So, you know, obviously, and even Madison, I was very invested in his story, and he's a terrible person, like he's a bad guy. And yet, at some point, I was kind of rooting for him at the same time. So when in the end, you started coming to a conclusion and there were obviously shocking deaths and how people basically came to peace at the ends, such as one of the brothers and one of the three sisters, it was really, I don't know the word for it because it happened so quickly and I love fast paced. So I was like, no, not that character. You're not allowed to kill that character. So because I was invested in them.
I'm glad you liked the Soka part because I was so worried that was going to come across as contrived when I started writing that, like the whole psychic power thing. Like I was like, is this taking a shortcut? That was one of my big fears. So I'm glad everybody's responded positively to that character. So I'm glad.
It did surprise me at the start because I was like, oh, okay, this is a different element to, and because your book's 180,000 words, I think it is. So I think when it got to that point, I was like, oh, okay, well, and again, like I've read many books that do the same, but it's just adding for me as a reader to wrap my head around the next element. So it wasn't that, like, obviously there wasn't hesitation in me reading it, or it wasn't jarring in any way, but I was like, oh, okay, and we've expanded the story again. And that, again, it's not in a negative way. It was just basically a bubble that happened. And then it made so much sense, especially how everything then started happening. So it just showed throughout this whole book how important Soka was in the story. So I quite enjoyed it. It was just really interesting to see somebody on the other, I guess, spectrum, and how you could see how some of their abilities or powers worked.
I struggle with this. It's just running right in and just starting to throw out all kind of stuff. Do you have anything specifically to kind of focus on that you'd want me to, kind of
I think more so like massively, I know as a writer, my focuses are always the character development and the storyline. So I always believe in showing, not telling, in regards to writing. So I want the reader to become immersed in the environment, and I am curious as to how you found the element of Vivian and having the different demons, how you found the shift of her moving into her demons fluently, because in it, obviously, she becomes these physical beings, but there's also the mixture of what their personality is with hers. So it was a very intense character to write, and also there's a lot of strong characters around. So I'm curious as to what you thought about character development, and also the pace of it, I want to say.
Okay, definitely. So what I loved about the Vivian character is that she is that badass character. She's like that Xena warrior princess. She's that character that when she shows up, she's a lot like Tabitha in certain aspects. If I want to compare her, like if she's working a case, if she's on something, she knows what to do. She's not second guessing herself. She's not hesitating. Her instincts and her abilities are carrying her through everything. And I love characters like that, because they are just, when you see this, it's like when John Cena comes to the ring, in wrestling, when you hear his music come, somebody's about to get their ass beat because here comes John Cena. So whenever Vivian was on the page, you knew she was going to handle her business. And I loved that. I enjoy those kind of characters immensely. I love the different kinds of demons too. The bug demons I found really cool. I enjoyed the Destiny character quite a bit. I remember I told you about. I want to see more of that character. She reminded me of Lacey a little bit, except for the scene with Heyman where she's sucking him off, because like Lacey would not have gone for that shit. She would have like ripped his balls off. But yeah, I really liked that character because she was probably one of the most accessible characters to me. And this is the challenge that I have, I think, with paranormal fantasy, is that I have to, as a reader, I have to be able to kind of connect with the character. The characters in your book are also goddamn powerful and beautiful, and just they're so much better than me. I mean, the humans in the book are written to be like the stupid, like gawking weaklings. And as the reader, I'm a fucking human. I'd be one of them. So I'm like, I'm reading this almost like, am I reading the Bible? Like, am I so below these other characters? And with that, it was kind of hard to make, I guess, that emotional connection with it, because it's like they are so superior. If I was in that book, I would be like the dorky bartender character that you mentioned. Like just some dweeb that nobody would even care about. Hopefully, maybe I'd be him.
But you got to mention.
But yeah. And then on top of that, they were also made to be like wealthy and celebrities and everything else. So now it's like, even if they weren't super powered, they're still better than me. So I'm just like, that was the biggest, I think, barrier for me as a reader, was just trying to kind of get into the mindset of these characters, because they're already just on such a heightened level of above. But beyond that, I really liked the Vivian character a lot. And like I said, I liked her just constant badassery. I would have, once again, for reader immersion, and you did dip into, her human days a little bit. You mentioned her dog, and you mentioned like her ex-boyfriend and things like that. That was the closest gateway I think we really got to I want to know how much more is there to Vivian. And I'm hoping that in the next books, those are things that get revealed. Because right now she's just like a fucking, like just a warlord, just walking around, just, snapping necks and cashing checks. And, I need, like, I guess I'm just I look at the complexity of characters and everything, and I need a little more accessibility to truly say that I'm emotionally, like, would I be torn to bits if that character were to get killed? I have to be able to, I guess, see a bit of my own humanity in them. The rest of it I loved. Like I said, that would be the way, and it's not even a criticism that would stop me from going back for more. Because if anything, it makes me want more. And that's really the key I want you to take away from it, because it's not me saying that what I got wasn't good. It's what I'm saying is I want more.
That makes me really thank you very much. I appreciate that. And it does make me very excited because I've already written the next couple of chapters of book 2, and I am swimmingly excited because it does bring in those elements, and there's a lot more backstories to her demons as well, because in it, each of her demons that she's made a contract with, they all had former lives. They already had their own existence. So basically book 1, and you'll probably find this in a lot of my series, book 1s are always more so people can have a ground for the world that they live in and a taste of the main character. And then as they spiral into the other books and into the chapters, because in all of my books, usually there will be an undoing for the main character. And in the next book, and I've already started writing about some, like her succubus, you, within the first few chapters, find out her backstory. And it's
perfect.
pretty,
I love that. I loved that.
It's pretty intense. And so even then, one of the scenes that I wrote was very, like, I came out of that going, I think that's the goriest chapter I've ever written in any book. Like, it's just very, very wrong. And it's interesting because it's really taking me to an interesting place, especially in what I really wanted from this book and from this series is you have Vivian, who's a badass woman, and then you have Haman, who is a demon lord who she's contracted to. And it's funny because she is in an abusive relationship. Like, this is what this is. And no matter what way you look, yes, she's badass. She doesn't realize she's a victim. But at the very center of it, in the very core, it is a very domestic relationship that they have. And it's a whole hunger for power, but also the having to appease him, the having to, being scared of him and being shadowed by him as well. So there is no, as powerful and as badass as she is, there is no free will there, or it's very limited. And so I'm excited in the series to, one, break out of that and how she's going to come out on top of that. And it's very difficult also to express that to the reader because she's not a woman who ever considers herself as a victim, nor will she ever. So it's very hard to obviously explain those elements, but it's very rewarding at the same time as a writer to express that. And then you have the main character. So you have Gabe, who's the main angel. And the thing that I love about their relationship is he wants her to change, and she will never change. And so it goes through this, and, and that'll be their main storyline amongst the series. And, you're going again with the love triangle and such, but the whole time it is about this woman, about this, mastering her own contracts and demons with these other 7 demon women, but that he wants her to change. And in relationships, in any woman's daily relationships, they will often feel the pressure of having to change to fit into a mold, or have to, be better or whatever. And that's the thing, it's not who she is, it's not who she wants to be. So then it challenges then if he, the man, is willing to change into her element. So then that also brings a lot of things in, but I really am looking forward to showing you book 2, I guess.
I love what you wrote at the end. Well, I was going to ask you, because this kind of hit me. I know this seems like something that was very personal and meant to you. And you can tell me if there's if it's something very personal. You don't have to go into any detail, obviously. But you wrote at the end that writing this made me not so scared. What is there? I'm sure there's a meaning into that. Whatever you're willing to share, I'd love to know, because I was very curious at the end when I saw that last line.
Yeah. So it is. So when I was like a teen, and everyone has their own beliefs, and I am all for whatever anyone believes in, as long as that still makes them a better person. But when it comes to topics such as supernatural or, what's on the other side or things such as that, growing up and through my teens especially, and even now, I was raised very spiritually, so to speak. But in my teens especially, there were a lot of bad things that I saw, and it scared me a lot. So I do, and that's why reading horror or even reading your topic, so to speak, scares me a lot, because I do genuinely believe that those things exist. And so having encountered certain things, and a lot of people don't know this, and only though, well, I guess a lot of people will know this now, but a lot of the stories in there, so the Shadow Minds Journal is what it is called, is on the basis of a lot of the encounters that I've had personally. So when she's having her dreams with, the bad people that don't have a physical form, when she goes into the Shadow Minds Journal to report it, majority of those were things that I'd experienced myself. So in a way, I was very scared to write this book, because I had the concept. And so I wanted to because in each of my books, I want to add personal elements to them. And so I really wanted to address this one. And I was glad that I did it. In a way, I found it almost therapeutic, because initially I was terrified that it may bring up certain things, or it would encourage those encounters again. But also as an adult, I don't have those experiences anymore. And so I guess, it's really good just to write about it, to have it on a page and know that it still has no power over me, if that makes sense.
It does. Absolutely, it does. I mean, writing it's a therapeutic thing. We get into the arts, whether we write, whether we paint, whether we sing. Yeah. I think it's all self-care is why we do those things. And then we just find the ability to market that shit, and that's even better. So yeah, I mean, things that I would have done differently. Well, I mean, we'll get to that when you want to get to that part.
Yeah, no time like the present.
Okay, so I gotta go first on this, Laura. I knew somebody's gonna have to be mean first. It's like, damn it.
Fine, good.
No, I don't have a lot of negative thing to say at all. As far as from the writing aspect, repetitive word use was the one thing that did jump out the most. Purred is in there a lot. Every character's purring all the time. That would be one thing I would say to just, I always keep Google open, and I always have it to the Merriam-Webster website. And I will look up, I have my online thesaurus going at all times, I guess. Because the character purred their response, or they charmed a smile. Charming a smile is in there a lot. So yeah, from the writer perspective, yeah, that's the one thing I did see a lot was kind of repetitive use of charmed and purred, which I'm guessing are just two phrases you kind of like. And because I'm the same way with the word however.
And that it doesn't surprise me at all, because I know I'm guilty of that. And obviously, being a writer, we all know our strengths and weaknesses. And it's funny because my recurring words are never in different books. I will have, for some reason, recurring words that I will use in only that particular book. So it is something I have to be watchful of, and I'm not at all surprised that that's something that you picked up on at all. So I'm not, I'm thick-skinned, that's okay. I can take that well.
Well, one thing I do is just, when you get your manuscript type up, just control F that and look up those words that you use a lot, and really see how many times, or get Pro Writing Aid will tell you, will catch. And that's how I found out the word however. I was using it so damn much. One of my big mistakes used to be with dialogue tags. I never knew how to step away from them, because I guess I always felt like I had to really drag the reader through by the hand. And it's like, oh no, I need you to know which character is talking. So every time it would be hello, said Mark. Hi, said Jenny. Come on in, Mark said. Sure, Jenny replied. And it was Creeperoni's readings and things like that where I started hearing the audio versions back. And same question back to you, technically wise, what jumped out at you on mine?
So there was only one thing. It's not that bad. It's just because I think also as authors, we pick up on certain things. But mine was, and you only did it twice. There was only 2 incidences of it. But you told, you didn't show. And so it depends like what kind of writing style, like this is for people who are watching. The two elements are, you can tell people through, or you're showing them as they go through. And I found that in just 2 sentences, and it wasn't anything huge, that you said, and you were addressing the reader, and you could have a feel for how that environment was or something like that. And it wasn't massive. And the only reason why I picked up on it was because I'm currently going through an older book and eliminating that. And I that's why I recognized it. And it wouldn't have jumped out at me if you had already used that in your book, but because yours is showing the whole way through, and that was the only reason why it jumped out at me. So if that was intentional, then that's perfect. It was just, it seemed alienated to me because there was only 2 incidences of it, and it had been the only time you used it. So like I said, it's not a big thing, it's not a bad thing. That was it. The rest, the writing was like perfect, to be honest. I thought it was great. So
thank you. That gives me so much confidence, because 180,000 words, that's a lot of room to leave mistakes in.
Yeah. And
before I move that into publication, that this is my big novel. And, but thank you. I mean, like I said, I mean, when you and I first agreed to do this, and I started to really look at your resume in full, and it's like, holy shit, it's like, this person is either going to really energize my career or really destroy me. One of these 2 things is going to happen. So I'm really happy that this landed well for you.
And here's the interesting thing as well, though, is like, it is amazing. Like book 15 for myself is coming out in 3 months. Super excited. But it's funny because I'm currently going through an older series at the moment. So I published this series in 2015, and I'm going through it now. And I am fixing up so much because my writing has evolved in those years. Like it was when I first started my first books, not horrible, but the story was there, but the writing wasn't. And it's only because I've written millions of words afterwards and published all these books that I'm coming to a place where I've published the Shadow Minds Journal, for example, and I'm confident in my voice now. I'm confident in what I'm doing. Whereas you could look at some of my previous works and I don't feel as confident in them, but I love them because it just shows my growth and development. So I think for your debut novel, it's phenomenal. Like it's genuinely good quality.
Thank you so much. I'm trying to think. See, this is like, getting halfway through your book, and I realized, I said, this isn't going to be the edgy experience that I think we initially thought going into this, because for those of y'all listening, the original idea behind this was like, can we critique face to face, the people who like to hide behind the keyboards and everything like that? Well, let's show the world what it looks like when the 2 authors actually have to tell each other. But I got through your book and I said, I don't have anything bad to say about this. Like, I really had to dig. And that's another big thing to take as a compliment is, I really had to look hard I wanted to come up with a few criticisms only because I wanted to be fair to you. You had read mine and looked at it like a book report and come back with all this kind of stuff. And all I had in response was, oh, I loved yours. It was great. I would have felt like I was cheating you out of your half of this experience here, right? So I said, no, let me go through it and let me find some things. And I hate doing that. I hate looking for negativity. I mean, I would love to as a reader, if I had bought this book and just read it, I would have nothing but great things to say about it.
And it's funny because, like, obviously I had to be nitty gritty and say, by the way, there's 2 accounts of where you use the word you. Come on now. And obviously that is nothing that we would usually honestly, we would never even bring up. And I kind of feel disappointed in this project that we'd set for ourselves, because we were wanting to be extremely critical on it. We wanted to showcase that there can be a appreciation and good working relationship, as well as to be able to offer criticism in a friendly manner, in a constructive manner, opposed to, in any negative way. And I was disappointed that I enjoyed your book so much because I couldn't find any of those elements that I suppose we were really looking for. And it kind of, in one way, it didn't defeat the purpose of this task, but it also, well, good on us for writing good
right. I mean, hey, we're fucking good at what we do.
Yeah.
Let's
we're good at what we do.
Yeah. Why are we like, yeah, we shouldn't be sad about this, you know?
I know, and that's the weird thing. Is like I had geared myself up so much for wanting to find elements within the story that could pique, viewers' interest or make them think, oh, maybe that's something that I've done or I've neglected in my story. And I couldn't highlight any of those in your book. So it made it difficult but great at the same time. I'm a mixed emotion about it.
I love the fact that I loved your book.
I think this was still productive. It was interesting to do, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. And it was also nice to know that sort of I consider myself as a somewhat experienced writer, and it was nice to know what things that I was looking out for and what things that I could really appreciate and compliment in your writing. So I knew I liked you before. I like you even better now. And thank you for sharing your story with me.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing yours with me and with everyone. And thank you for being my final beta reader. Folks, get ready for the Tobit world. It's invading the world near you very, very soon. And definitely from the King of Schlock himself, K-Man and Kellum, look, the Shadow Minds Journal, go out and buy it. Order it on Amazon. You will love this book. It has my complete and total unequivocal endorsement. I don't read paranormal. I don't read romance. I don't really read erotic. I'm going to tell you, this was an absolute joyride.